Hi everyone, welcome to Data Zen Podcasts from Data Zen community. We unite IT experts working in data who love data or who want to learn about the world of data. I am Venkatesh, and today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic: data vault, why and how. A quick background about myself: I'm project manager at EPAM for over 2.5 years. And today in this virtual studio, I have with me expert on this topic, Manish. Welcome, Manish.
Hi,
Uh,
hi Venkatesh.
hey, for the benefit of the listeners, Manish, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, Venkatesh. Hi, this is Manish. I'm a seasoned data solution architect with over 20 plus years of experience in data engineering as well as in analytics. So my journey began as a data engineer uh, way back, and where I worked as a various on a various data platform and data warehouse solution before transitioning into big data and the analytics world. Over the past decade, I have led medium and large scale projects as an architect, focusing primarily on cloud warehouse, data lake implementation. And for the past 2 years, my focus has been on ML ops and ML engineering. And currently, I'm serving as a platform architect for a generative AI implementation. So that's about me.
Thanks, Manish. Um, Data vault is a data model like third normal form or dimensional model. So I'll give a brief overview about what Data Vault is, and then we will discuss some interesting questions with Manish. So let's get started. Data Vault, um as a modeling technique, was conceived by Dan Linstead, who was a data warehousing expert and BI consultant in the late 90s. He was working on trying to solve the problem of rapidly changing business requirements and how it impacts the traditional warehousing techniques. And in year 2000, he published 5 articles related to this data vault, and from there it started evolving into a much popular data modeling technique. The key motivation, or what is the problem it was trying to address, was, as I mentioned, the changing business requirements. There are multiple data sources from which the data was required to be consumed, and there were challenges with respect to data, traditional data warehouse models, like even historical data tracking in terms of long-term historical maintenance without much change or impact to the data warehouse model. And that is where data vault model became popular, because it was flexible, scalable, and especially it was adaptable to the complex scenarios of enterprise data warehouse needs. So, and not just the traditional data warehouse problems, of course it worked on it, but also um, it was very agile and robust, and eventually it became a best practice, one of the best practices to be used for data warehouse, and many organizations across the world started implementing this modeling technique. um, in year 2013, version 2.0 of data vault model came into being. Why? Because alongside, while this model was evolving, even the technologies were evolving: big data, no SQL, real time data streaming. All these technologies and business needs were changing, and it required to adopt, and data vault 2.0 uh, came into being, and it became the leading approach of data warehouse implementation. Like any data vault model, which has to prove its mettle for staying long term and being used by everyone, it will always have some criticisms. What are the criticisms this modeling technique faced and overcame? It was considered by some as being little complex. Some thought it is requiring higher level of expertise in order to implement it, and in some scenarios, few felt that there is a it is less efficient compared to the traditional data warehousing techniques. However, Over the time, it mitigated these problems with proper implementation and tooling. I'll talk about how it works. So there are three parts to data vault modeling: hubs, links, and satellites. Hubs consist of a list of keys, and links are association between these keys, and satellites store descriptive information or attributes about those keys. Uh, from this, you can get an idea that somewhere the motivation is to separate the concerns so that it can, this is where the foundation of flexibility and scalability comes into this modeling technique. Let me explain. Hubs: any data vault requires a stable structure on which it can be built. And keys, business keys, for example, a product ID, something, a stock keeping unit uniquely identifies a product. Or if you're talking about airlines industry, an aircraft uniquely identified by a key. These keys rarely change over time. Your business needs can change, requirements change, but these business keys remain stable and constant. So this provided a stable structure on which a data vault can be built, a data model can be built. These don't change with your process, business process rules. The, as I mentioned, links are the association between these keys, and satellites have the attributes or the descriptive information about the keys. Now this changes as per the business needs, and that is why even if there is change, these changes are captured in satellites, but it has no impact on the keys or the relationships between the keys, which is the links. If there are not only the change to the keys but also changes to the relationships can be tracked over time with the help of satellites. So that's a very interesting design that has been put into this data modeling. Let's take an example. There is a product and there is a customer who buys that product. The product and customer are identified by the keys stored in the hubs, and the transaction of customer buying a product is represented by a link, and the various attributes about the product and the customer, for example, the product's type, color, price, these can be tracked in satellites, and customers contact information in the customers satellite. Now let's introduce a change to this use case. Let us say a business change comes, there is a change to the type of the product, or there is a change in the customer information. We will change the satellite, but there is no impact to the product or the customer hubs or the links. So you can see how well separation of the concerns makes it easy to scale and make it flexible to business changes without any impact to the key tables or entities of the model. Now, where does it fit in the entire data vault, where warehousing solution? Where does the data vault fit in, right? So right after your staging, but before the access in the performance layer, basically the data marts, which is implemented to solve a specific business problem. This comes before that. It acts as a foundational layer for that subsequent layer in order to load the data. So all the historical data are stored in the foundational layer, and it acts as a source for that reporting data from that historical data. So the basis for this data model is agile data warehouse modeling, where you can adapt to changing business needs. You don't have to design facts and dimensions upfront. You can iteratively model your uh, design. The structures and relationship of the data model allow you to bring change over time. Some quick success stories about Data Vault. A Dutch bank, ABN AMRO, it had 200 source systems and it successfully integrated using Data Vault model, and it was able to bring improved data quality and faster reporting. Another success story, Verizon, it consolidated many data warehouses into a single unified system using Data Vault. It led to cost savings, consistency, and cross functional analytics. WebMD, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, US Defense, FedEx, US Department Agriculture are also some of the success stories. So I hope that gives a good overview of what Data Vault is all about. Now we will go to some more practical aspects, some good questions that we'll discuss with Manish, and we'll try to explore this Data Vault. Manish, my first question is with respect to cloud data warehouse environment, right? What are the primary benefits of using Data Vault model in a cloud data warehouse environment?
Sure, Venkatesh. Before we get into the Q&A part, a few things which I want to add uh, in your explanation on the data vault, right? So, very important aspect, like, and which everybody kind of ignore or don't give much significance to, that is the key part, right? So when you mention the key, it's basically the hash key which play a very important role, not just a role of identifying a record as a unique, but even in your data pipeline, ETLs and all, right? I will explain to you when we actually take up some scenarios that how this hash key, right? Because there is a fundamental difference between the data vault 2.0 and the version before that. The version before 2.0, it was a key which is a either a natural key or the primary key, the way we used to create in any databases. But in the 2.0, they introduced as a hash key. Now hash key is something which you which you generate through some function, hash function, right? So that's an interesting part which people generally ignore or don't give much importance to that. But then that feature of data vault play a very important or significant role across the development of data vault implementation. Okay, so now I'll come to your question in terms of how the data vault modeling is a good fitment for a cloud kind of solution, right? And it again equate to the features that you called about, right? The flexibility, the scalability part, right? If you look at any cloud implementation, whether it's Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud, you always count the cloud solution based on the horizontal scaling, right? So as you build the things, you want to scale the resources horizontally across the storage, across the processing, across the memory, across the caching and all, right? That's where the modeling is the right fit. The data vault modeling is the right fit to this kind of implementation, right? If you take an example of very famous cloud data warehouse is Snowflake, right? Now if you look at the Snowflake architecture, it it focuses more on how you can horizontally scale the the warehouse, the tables within the warehouse, and the objects within your data model, right? Now if and that's a very right companion for the data vault. So I'm not saying, I'm not discounting the data breaks or any other uh, data warehouse cloud solution, but the implementation where I was a part of, the cloud uh, warehouse as a Snowflake play a significant role in terms of scaling all the data that is coming in using with the SaaS ETL solutions. So we used a different SaaS ETL solutions like Fivetran. We used Matillion for the implementation. And when you build the pipeline along with the data vault implementation, loading hub satellite and the link in parallel, you need that support from your warehouse. You need those support from your virtual warehouse like a snow from the Snowflake, right? And that's where it will give that kind of support where you can scale all of these loads in parallel, right? You don't need to kind of load the dimension first and then wait for the dimension to get loaded and then load the fact. So most of your sequential thing which you used to do in a traditional or conservative data warehouse load will get drastically changed in these kind of situation, right? Where you can load pretty much everything in parallel, right? And for that you definitely need a cloud platform underneath. You need a the those kind of warehouses which you can scale up, scale down as and when it is required, and do the dynamic scaling like the Snowflake does, right? So just to kind of answer your question, that's the right companion for the data warehouse implementation.
So in short, basically the way data vault model is, it complements the cloud
Yes.
architecture of horizontal scaling and loading in parallel. Okay. Next question is, in which scenarios or use cases is data vault modeling particularly advantageous?
Yes. So definitely data vault is not uh, a single bullet for all your solution, so all your problems. Um, but then you need to look at the scenario and then decide on which modeling technique that you should go with, right? Um, Basically, the data vault modeling is very prominent or play a very important role where your requirements are not very clear at the start, and that's generally a scenario for every business we build the data
Very
warehouse for.
practical. Yeah.
Very practical, right? So whenever you have either half baked information, or you have a lot of opportunity to scale in the future from the business point of view, right? So if I give an example, let's suppose if I know that, okay, what all the data source that I currently have, and then what all the reports that I'm going to generate out of it, right? What all the reports or analysis that I my business is looking for from these data sources. Now you or your business think that, okay, this can scale further in terms of adding new modules, adding new business scenarios, and all, right? But then you cannot wait till that time, right? You still need to build a warehouse. You need to still process huge, humongous or huge amount of data as a part of this module, right? And you need to still generate those insights, analytics, and reports on either on the Power BI or Tableau or anywhere, right? Now, in a typical data warehousing scenario, what happens is that if you do the modeling based on some predefined notions, like, again, I don't want to blame on the dimensional modeling, but then if you just model based on the technical terms, right, dimensions and the fact where there is no business involvement into it, you will actually get bounded to those situations, that, okay, limited to only those dimension and limited to only those facts. Now later, if the new dimensions or the description get added to the business, if the new matrices coming into the business, you either need to restructure your fact and dimensions, or you need to again duplicate those fact and dimension to adopt the changes in at the business side. But that is not the case with data vault, right? Data vault can scale from the place where it actually got built in the last release, right? So if I'm building the data vault for a particular module, and tomorrow new module get added, I'm just going to expand my data vault with some additional links, with some additional hub and the additional satellite if I want to maintain the history for those entities, right? So data vault uh, is very popular and prominent in the place where your business requirements are ever changing. First thing. Second is you need auditability, right? You need to audit every time that, okay, what all the changes and where my lineage is and all of those things in terms of sources. Uh, Very important part is your same data coming from the multiple data sources, right? So if I'm getting the employee information from my ERP, from my HR system, and the different places, and suppose if I have a Oracle HRMS system also, then I need to find out first that, okay, where those data relates to, and then I keep adding those sources one after another in my warehouse, right? Now data vault very nicely support that, because as and when you start adding the sources for the same entity, for same employee, it will give you a flexibility to kind of add those as a separate satellite and then create the link between that, right? If you get some more extra entity as a part of the another system for the employee, you can add that as a part of the expansion of that data vault. So those kind of scenario where you need auditability, you need more flexibility in terms of scaling your warehouse model, that's where the data vault is the right fit.
Yeah, it's very common challenge. In fact, it will be a lot of value data vault will bring in these kind of scenarios where you cannot build everything upfront. You need to
Yes.
evolve with the requirements. Makes sense. Now we talk about the good things about the data vault. Let's look at the other side. Can you discuss some common pitfalls, common challenges that is faced during implementation of data vault and how to overcome them?
Okay. Uh, so I would like to give some examples here, just to be more practical, in the sense that okay, I want to make sure that I'm not just reading through some bookish challenges, right? So I was involved into one of the implementation for an insurance kind of business, right? Where the data coming from not only the companies who are providing the claim information, but also the companies who are collecting the information about the losses, right? So think about any property restoration company. Think about any insurance, right? Now, the few data provider, they provide the data to the insurance company saying that okay, uh, some particular geography this loss has happened. Then insurance company want to check that okay, whether the claim is actually matching to those losses or not, and they want to precisely figure out that okay, what actually the loss is, right? So this kind of scenario, in addition to the banking and the finance, because this kind of situation where you have to either tally or compare between the different transactions is very common across financial domain, right? But then as per my experience with the insurance, it is a completely different ball game altogether, because there are many kind of vendors and the companies and the third parties which are involved not only in the data collection but into data verification, data validations, and all of those things, right? Now, what happens is when you bring all these data into a data vault, right? Now, if you have, say, X number of entities, your data vaults triplicate that, not just duplicate, right? So
Yes,
you
right.
have hub, you have a satellite, you have a link, right? Now, when you actually go to the business, let's assume a IT department of a banking domain, or to the insurance, right? The very first challenge that you face is like you tell them that okay, data vault, they know only the security vault, right? For them, the concept of data vault itself is not that digestible, or something which they came across say 2 years or 5 years back, right? They are very much familiar about third normal form. They are very much familiar about fact and dimensional modeling. But the moment you bring up the concept of data vault, they become a little bit hesitant. Oh, what is this data vault is, right? Why want to create the hub, you want to create the satellite, or you link. They think that you are going to build some kind of very scientific solution, right? But it's other way around. But I'm just trying to kind of uh, pose it as a challenge. Actually, it's not that difficult, but from the business point of view, it's something very, very new, because they have never dealt with this kind of situation where they need to figure out what is the business key, how those two entities get linked to the link table and the satellite, all of those things. So that's the first thing, that to get the business on the table in terms of understanding of data vault concept. That's first part of it. Second part, as I mentioned, this triplicate, right? So if they come up with some 100 entities, when they put whole data into a data vault and we model it, it becomes 300 or maybe 200 plus tables, right? And the next day you get a call from your IT manager saying that okay, uh, as an architect, what you're doing, like you're making my entities three times, right? Uh, the complexity is going to get triple, and the maintenance will get tripled, and we have a lot of technical depths in terms of maintaining all of these entities and all. So that's a common. I completely understand that, right? Because as you add more entities, more tables, it is really difficult to manage those later. So these are the common challenges. Even the business also should have a good understanding on their own uh, uh, the workflow, right? If they don't understand their workflow, if they don't understand the key entities, finding out the business key would be really difficult for them. And if you don't find the right business key in the data vault, your data vault is going to get die in few months. I'm not going even going to the years, but the moment it about to start, it will fail at there itself, right? So because that business key become will be a driver for your hash key generation, right? And if your hash key get generated wrongly, your whole data vault will fall, right? So these are the common challenges that you generally face when you deal with any data vault modeling for any business.
So the business adopting it, and second, the explosion of tables. Suddenly you see three tables instead of one. These two things are very common. Yeah, I sort of relate to it. Traditional data warehouse modeling, dimensional modeling has been extremely successful, and introducing this new idea of vault, and then making it a reality, of course, will require a lot of challenge and explanation to go through. But of course, building something that adapts and changes as per your needs requires the grounds of work. So this is the investment that goes into it. So thanks, Manish. My next question is: can you share some real world example, your own experience, or based on your knowledge, any case studies where data vault model has been successfully implemented?
Sure. So I really wanted to give an example from the financial domain because you called out many companies uh, in your starting speech, saying that okay, these company, the financial domains or financial banking and all have implemented the data vault. But I want to give a separate angle in terms of, as I called out, like uh, I was working with one of the insurance assignment. So the insurance, or where you have a claim and the losses together, right? Uh, or maybe any kind of business where you see that okay, there is a very limited requirement at the start, right? So I just want to give an example. Like, let's suppose if we collect the data from a specific set of uh, a business unit within a big enterprise, right? Like if you take an uh, example of an insurance, right? Now, insurance, if you're dealing with, say, property insurance, just one part of it. Now, property insurance may have a different kind of flavor of data that is coming in, right? So you have a damages in the property by the fire, by water damages, floods, right? Hurricane, volcano, lot of different kind of possibility, right? Now think about a department which is dealing with only just one set of information, right? um, they wanted to experiment the data vault, and then if the experiment successful, then they want to expand it to other of their information, right, or other of their businesses, right? Now what if your customer come up with that kind of requirement, right? Would you go with the dimensional model? Probably yes, but then will it expand? Probably no, right? Because even if it is coming from the same company, the next department will have a completely different kind of information. Even though when I say completely different kind of information, does not mean that it is coming with a different flavor altogether, right? The data remains the same. The data remains to be data coming from the losses, the data coming from the claims, the information about the properties, owners, and all, right? But then the kind of losses are entirely different, and another department is dealing with that, right? It's a very common scenario. So then we decided to go with the data vault because when we studied the data vault, we realized that okay, this is something which we can use as a background kitchen kind of thing, right? So if you look at any restaurant, you cook something and you never know what other ingredient is going to come as a part of the cooking, right? You don't know uh, down the down the line, or after some period, what is the new dishes a customer will require, right?
Yeah,
But then I should be ready for everything in my
that's
kitchen,
right. That's right.
right? So that's where we thought, okay, why don't we build this kind of kitchen where we keep all the data ready, and as and when new requirement or new ingredients or new raw material comes, we can keep added in this particular structure. And as the requirement changes from, or maybe new requirement come from the the serving point of view, or the analysis, or the reporting point of view, we should be able to serve from here, right, rather than creating this whole pipeline again.
Yeah.
So that's where we thought, okay, data vault is giving us that flexibility, that scalability, right? And then in terms of serving, right? Now, serving is also a very interesting part of this entire dimension of data vault, right? So, and I want to highlight it very strongly, because most of the time there is a comparison between the data vault and dimensional modeling,
Dimensional
right?
model. Yeah.
You always hear from everywhere that, okay, should we use this or that? But what I would suggest is, and what I would recommend is, not to compare these two, because the dimensional model is more a customer facing, right? What your customers required. That's where you have a facts. That's where you have a dimensions and the history, and the calculated measures and all of those things, right? It can complement the data vault from the serving point of view, but it cannot replace a data vault, right? Now, data vault also has a different way of serving it, which they call it as a business vault, right? So if you look at the whole data vault has a two component. One is a raw data vault, and another is a business data vault.
Business model. Yeah.
Business vault, yeah. So the raw data vault is actually the data vault which we generally refer to. Nobody give a thought upon the business vault. Business vault is actually a has those components which will create the entire structure of your serving to the business. And in a practical example, without creating the dimensional model, we served to the customer all kind of reports, including uh, the cubes kind of report, including the aggregated report, roll ups, right? All be served through the business vault, right? Which is not physicalized. It is all logical structure. But then, what I'm trying to tell here is, like, in a practicality, you can still live with only with the data vault, which comprise of your raw vault and the business vault. But yes, if you have a specific requirement from the business on those specific metrics, on those specific measures, if they have very clearly defined KPIs, you can very well create your dimensional model on top of it.
Yeah. In this example, I can relate to two things which data vault directly solve. One is the you mentioned that in the insurance there are multiple sources, many departments which is
Yes.
sourcing the data, and it's a very practical problem of disparate data sources, one disconnected from each other, and your data model should be able to sort of connect it and give a unified view, right? So that's where
Yeah, it's not
I
just
think you.
connecting, Venkatesh,
Mhm.
but then you should be able to trace it back, right? So my one loss is coming from four different places, right? The loss ID remains to be the same, loss number remain to be the same, right? But then, you never know, the same loss has been aggregated from different places, and now I need to trace it back, that, okay, which source
The
is giving
change
me
came from. Yeah.
which loss, right, or which loss ID. So this auditability, tagging the right set of information, is the thing that data vault can give it to you, not the dimensional model per se, with that accuracy.
Right, right. Historical data tracking is one of the
Yes.
foundational things that work. And the other thing you mentioned is the data vault is unlike you can't compare it with the dimensional model. It acts
Yes.
as a foundational layer based on which you can serve any business need, whatever the customer, which food he wants. You can just
Yeah.
use this kitchen to serve it. So, uh,
Right.
very relatable. Um, And the next question is, how does Data Vault model support agile and iterative development in the data warehousing projects?
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I think very good question in today's scenario, right? Now,
Yes.
we always talk about agile, sprint, user stories, right? Iterations, right? Now, that's very interesting part of data warehouse implementation. In my experience, uh, I have done many data warehouse implementation and the data lake implementation, but my very recent past experience kind of uh, is a game changer for me, or even from my learning point of view, because it was a pure agile implementation, right? When I say pure agile implementation, what does it mean? That in every iteration, or in every different releases, we used to release with the new modules with the same model, which is very important part, right? When I say same model, means you're not changing the model, right? If you change the model, then you can't say that with the same model, right? You are just expanding that model. So we expanded in every iteration. So what agile says, that when you iterate it, either you improve it or you expand it, right? And that's where we did, right? We keep expanding. And as we get any backlog, those backlog, once we kind of figure out, okay, how to fix it and how to find out the right source, it will it is always easy to kind of again add it into the next user story and build it on top of it what you already built it in the past sprint, right? So data vault fits very well from the agile implementation, because one thing, you can implement small and then expand on top of it. Second is, you can very well do the iterations on the things which you have not completed in the previous sprint, right? So you can very well fix the performance issue later. You can even link the additional, say, in a typical language, in the description or dimension table later point of time, right? As in when you get a complete information from the business. So these kind of loop back and the iteration kind of thing is not possible when you do with the 3NF kind of implementation or the dimensional model. So it's a very right fit from the whole agile framework perspective.
Yes, iteration usually deals with doing taking small chunks and doing failing fast, recovering fast, building on top of
Yes.
it, and the flexibility is very fundamental to it, which is what the data vault is bringing, I believe.
Yeah, and every customer come nowadays like with all the cost issues and the budgeting constraint. Every
Yeah,
customer won't come with MVP, right?
yeah. No one
They
wants to
they
build everything upfront, a big elephant,
Yes,
right?
yes.
They want
No,
to
no,
incrementally
nobody
build.
comes with the big bang approach of building an enterprise data warehouse or enterprise data lake kind of implementation. They say that, okay, yeah, I have few set of information. I want to run this kind of discovery. I want to run this kind of analytics on top of it. My CEO or CDO need these kind of reports, right?
Yeah,
So they come up with the MVP, and they don't want to run it as a POC. Just there is a difference, right? So
yeah,
you can't just once you implement or develop that, you can't just throw away. You need to build on
right,
top of it. That's
right.
where the agile implementation and the data vault go hand in hand. You do the small MVP implementation. It could be small, big, or it could be big as like 8-month implementation. Then, if it is successful and if they okay with that, and if they have a further budget and the investment for it, you can start building on top of it. So they don't want to kind of reset their meter. It will start after 8 month, with more
Yes,
budget and with more cost. Yeah.
yes. These are very practical problems,
Yes.
which makes sense. Now, the next question is, I'm sorry, the question I am eager to ask you. I've
Hmm.
been waiting for it. My favorite question. So, how does Data Vault model handle performance and scalability, especially in large scale data framework? Because we talk about three tables instead of one table, right? So, how to ensure that it is still performant, it works for large data sizes?
Correct. So I think this is a there is a very smart way to handle this thing, and I completely understand, and that's a drawback of a data vault. The way the data vault structure is, right, where you have one table, you create a hub of it, you create a satellite of it, and then you create a link if that entity is getting linked somewhere else. But now, um, how to handle that on the front? See, when you get the performance issue, if you hear any performance issue from the customer, it's primarily on the reporting side, right? See, again, I'll go take you back to the example of the restaurant, right? The kitchen. No customer will directly walk into the kitchen and saying that, okay, no, this thing is not, whatever you cooked is not good, right? Or it is not up to my expectation. They will complain only all and always to the waiter who is serving to them, right?
That's right.
And that's how you should understand that, okay, how the data vault performance problem has been handled, right? So, and where those will come only or mostly at the serving level, right?
That's
Because
right.
that's where you are going to get your those three tables or three set of tables into one, and you need to deal with all your joins, you need to deal with all your aggregations where data is spread across these multiple tables and all, right? If you're smart enough to handle those kind of situation where your data which is segregated across multiple tables within the raw vault, again, I don't call it as a data vault, within the raw vault, and nobody is going to come to the raw vault, right? Your
Mm.
customer, whether it is going to be a reporting consumer from the end user point of view, or the person who is sitting at the analytics uh, hat, right, with the analytics hat, is not going to come to your raw vault. They are going to come to a place where they can get all this data as a complete information, and your business vault is the place where they can get this complete information, right? So if you're
A
smart enough
playground to
to
actually play with, where
yes,
everything
play
comes
with,
together. Mm.
exactly. So that is the place where you can create those point in time table, bridge table, and if you're smart enough to model those bridge tables and point in time tables to maintain those history and then information that they want to aggregate across the different timelines and all, that is where the whole performance issue you can deal with, right? So just to answer your question in a very technical terms, if you model it correctly in your business vault with the all set of bridge tables and the point in time tables, I think you should be good in terms of dealing with those performance issue. If in case if you still have some issues, you can very well discuss with the business, figure out those KPIs, right, which they want to see it. You can create a dimensional model on top of it, right? Data vault does not stop you to not to create a dimensional model, right? So if your requirement is such a way that, okay, you need some kind of slowly changing dimension, or the dimension where you have a big fat fact tables and all, go ahead and do it, right? And you can deal with the performance issue at the serving side.
That's right. My my next question was sort of related to this. Some strategies to optimize performance in data vault. You mentioned about point in table and bridge tables. So the secret seems to be in proper implementation of it, and utilize the flexibility of data vault to supplement with even dimensional model if required, but go ahead with it. Is there any other optimization techniques that you would like to include, Manish, apart from this?
Yeah. So when we say performance, again, the performance issue which I we just talked about, it's more from the business point of view, or the front end, or the reporting point of view. There is a team sitting out there who is developing the things, right? They will also go through some kind of pain. They'll also go through some kind of performance issue, some kind of challenges. Now data vault provides a lot of flexibility for them also, right? And that's where I want to give some good points to the data vault, where it is easy for a developer to develop the things and fix the performance issues. I can tell you how it is going to be. So if you look at any typical data pipeline, right, or any ETL job which you develop to load the data for a specific transactions, right? So if I give an example like calculating some losses, calculating uh, some some financial transactions and all, you need to join the data across different dimension if you are into a dimensional model, right? Because you need to get
That's right.
item, you need to get account, you need to get customer address, lot of things, right? Here you need to focus only on the entities, right? You don't need to, because there is no concept of dimensions here, right? So one thing is, uh, your lookup will get drastically reduced. And when I say reduce, it
Okay.
can go to zero if you code it in a smart way. And that's where the hash keys are coming to the picture, right? So when you even load all the related dimension or the fact in the in the typical dimensional model, you need to do the lookup of dimensions
Yes,
and
right.
load this and that and all. Here you don't need to do that because once you know the business key, your business key is the input to generate a hash. Now, once you have that business key identified clearly, now wherever these business keys are there, you just use the hash key. You don't need to join the table to get that business key, right? So see how easy it is. And I would say that Data Vault 2.0 had really revolutionized the complete spectrum of data vault modeling, right? The moment they brought this hash concept, it is like become easy for all the ETL job to deal with the performance issue, right? Because in that case, you need to deal with only the performance issue related to your own load, right? You are not going to cross uh, cross dimension or cross entity issue where you need to do a multiple lookups, get the keys, collate those keys and use it on your load, right? So everything will get generated or populated independently, and multiple developer can work on the multiple jobs, right, in parallel. So your orchestration issue, your key generation issues, your workflow will get highly parallel and highly simplified in case of data vault modeling. And if you are smart enough developer, then you can even um, create some accelerator on top of it, right? So generating a hub table, right? It's a common logic, right? You can very well create one common function which can generate all of hub together, right? So if you are smart enough in terms of doing those uh, uh, generalization in the code, then I think you can deal with a lot of performance issue at the ETL level. And I already explained to you about the performance issue, how to handle it at the business level or the reporting level, using the business vault. If you can deal all of these things smartly, then I think the data vault will not be that painful as people think of.
And any data engineer knows the benefit of having one key to look up instead of doing many lookups and foreign keys and joins and
Yes.
also
Yes.
true. Um, how do you see data vault evolving to meet changing needs of data management and analytics?
I would say that okay. Again, I am not advocating data vault everywhere, but then nowadays every business scenario that we are dealing with, whether it is a data platform development or typical data warehouse development or data lake or data hub development, your your business requirements are keep changing every now and then. The companies are acquiring the new units, new businesses across their domain, right? So in these kind of scenario, if your data is dealt with the data vault, then the expansion and those acquisitions that business is doing it is going to go smooth across your data platform, across your data warehouse, right? So to answer your question precisely from the technical point of view, any new sources get added, or any new or any business get obsolete, right, or get replaced by some new business, can very well dealt with the data vault in comparison to any other data modeling because of the flexibility, auditability, scalability, and all these things which we discussed.
And it even opened some new avenues, like in case of Verizon success story, which I mentioned a while back. They unified multiple data warehouses, and now they were n- new opportunities of cross-functional analytics, which they were not able to do before. So the unification really helps evolve.
Exactly. I'll give you a
Mhm.
very precise example, or in a very modern term. Now everybody is talking about data mesh, right? Now in the data mesh, you have a multiple business stakeholder asking for different kind of data products out of your data, right? Now uh, think of that again, the whole kitchen backyard, or the kitchen in the restaurant, right? That's where your data vault get building a data mesh, right? Again, I don't want to call it specific tool name, but like DBT and all. Like if you are using DBT as a front end or as a ETL or as a data pipeline and all, then you can create a different models within it, right? So I can create a business vault, give it to the one business unit and say that okay, this is my bridge table, use it because they want to have a connected view or the flattened view of the data. They can use it for their data discovery analytics, but other set of user, they are coming with a very traditional requirement of those KPIs and this. So I can create a dimensional model on top of it and create another product and give it to them in terms of the Power BI report, right? So in your backyard or in your kitchen, your data is still get prepared within the data vault, the raw vault, but you are serving two in a two different way. One you're giving as a flattened structure, one way you're giving same data or maybe additional data, right? But your some set of information remains the same in that, right? And then you
Right.
give it to the another product, like use it as a KPIs, right, as a dimensional kind of structure. So you are actually building a distributed structure, right, and separation of duties here, because your this set of information is nothing to do with that set of, because that's completely aggregated dimension and the metrics focused. Here that is more flattened, not aggregated, right, more granular level. So you can even do the separation of duty, create a completely distributed architecture within the raw vault, which is not the case. At least I can proudly say that, or with my experience, I can very well say that not there in the dimensional model or 3NF.
At the core, I hear flexibility, flexibility, flexibility.
Yeah,
We are reaching the last question of
sure.
today's podcast. Are there any community forums, user groups, conferences where our listeners can stay up to date with the data vault and even network with other professionals?
Yeah, you can. Though there is a very less, or I would say very limited open source kind of thing, because unfortunately, Data Vault has been conceptualized with the Data Vault Alliance company, right? So they say that okay, they brought the Data Vault, which is true, but then there are very few influencer or the people who are actually releasing the architecture and design the approaches in the data vault. But I generally learn mostly from Patrick Cuba, one of the very prominent name in the data vault modeling. So his article and his blogs
I see a lot
really
of good
help me.
articles on LinkedIn from
Yes,
him. Yes.
from him. And then Data Vault Alliance, they generally release a lot of blogs and articles over a period of time. In fact, all our father of the data warehouse, they are also started supporting the data vault very strongly in last few 2 3 years, right? So then you
Yes.
can hear from those fathers also that okay, how the data vault modeling is a good fit for all the data warehouse that you can build. So yeah,
Right.
that's my recommendation.
So yeah, it's not something we can miss. It's a lot of things getting popular in last 2 3 years, everyone supporting it. So listeners, watch out for it. A lot of information you will be hearing in the future. So with that, we reached the end of our podcast. Just a quick recap: data vault, powerful model based on flexibility, scalability, and it addresses your complex and data warehouse needs, changing business scenarios. It's the flexibility helps us do iterative development, and even the challenges which we discussed in the podcast. There are ways to properly implement it, solve it, and uh, benefit from it. So whether you are a data architect, whether you are a data engineer, or just a data enthusiast like me, um, I think it's a worthy explore. Go ahead and see if it fits your use case. With that, thank you, Manish, for joining me in this
Sure.
podcast and sharing all the insights. Thanks,
Thanks, Venkatesh.
listeners, for joining today, and you all have a great day. Bye bye.
Thank you, Venkatesh. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.